When the mask falls, the truth is always crueler than you imagine. My boyfriend was cheating on me. The person in bed with him was the best friend I trusted most in the world. When I pushed open the door, they were tangled together on the king-sized bed in my bedroom. The air was thick with the stench of betrayal. One was the man I shared my life with. The other was the woman who'd sworn she'd be by my side forever. Instead, they had conspired together, stomping all over my trust. She frantically pulled the covers over her body. He turned pale, stammering my name as if a mere pretense of fear could erase everything. It was laughable. I didn't cry. I didn't fly into a rage and give them a show. With people like this, losing control is the fastest way to debase yourself. I simply pulled out my phone and calmly started a live stream. As soon as the camera was on, I curved my lips into a faint smile. Hello, everyone. Tonight, I'm broadcasting a major drama. It's called How My Best Friend and the Man I Love Most used my money, slept in my bed, and betrayed me. In less than a minute, the viewer count shot past 10,000. The comments section flooded the screen, while the two on the bed grew increasingly flustered, scrambling like two clowns dragged into the spotlight. I stood casually before the camera, my back to a wall covered in trophies and certifications. Then, I spoke slowly. I forgot to introduce myself. I'm a 3-time national MMA champion, a gold medal-winning clinical psychologist, and also the largest single shareholder of this streaming platform. I looked directly at the two of them, their faces now ashen, my voice soft yet sharp as a razor. Please, continue. Why stop now? A dirty play like this deserves a proper finale. I want everyone to see just how low so-called best friends and love can sink. On my phone screen, the live viewer count was skyrocketing at an almost uncontrollable rate. 10,000, 30,000, 100,000. The comment feed scrolled so fast it nearly obscured the entire view. Oh my God, it's intense from the get-go. A queen who stays this calm is on another level. Wait. That bedroom looks familiar. Isn't that Rick Sterling's place? The person above has a sharp eye. So who is this woman? I thought Rick Sterling always projected that unattached Manhattan elite image. Rick Sterling, my boyfriend of 3 years, was a well-known lifestyle influencer, so famous that everyone assumed he was born into that world of privilege. But only I knew that the glamorous facade was an image I had meticulously crafted for him from scratch. Right now, the face that had charmed countless women was a mask of pure horror and confusion, and the woman next to him, Jenna Miles, my best friend of 10 years, was curled under the blanket, her head covered, her voice a panicked, muffled shriek. Arya, are you insane? Turn it off. Turn it off now. It was only then that Rick seemed to snap out of his stupor, finally finding his voice. He ground out his words, trying to feign anger, but the desperation in his eyes was unmistakable. I didn't even bother to look at him, leisurely panning the camera to his face, still flushed from their activities, my voice so calm it was chilling. Allow me to introduce everyone to Rick Sterling. Online, he presents himself as a single, high-society heir from New York, untouched by the common world. The truth is, for the past 3 years, he's been living off my money. I tilted my head slightly, the smile never leaving my face. That $8,000 Versace robe he's wearing? I bought it. The $50,000 Patek Philippe on his wrist? A gift from me. And this penthouse you're all seeing? I paused for a beat before slowly closing my lips. The deed is in my name. My voice, clear and crisp, broadcast through the microphone and into the live stream. The comments exploded. A leech! I followed him for 3 years. It was all an act. I feel sick. I once gifted him 10 of the most expensive virtual yachts. My wallet weeps for its foolishness. This woman is a legend. Expose him. Girl, let him know what it means to ruin your own life. Rick's complexion shifted rapidly, from flushed red to ghostly white, then a sickly gray, as if all the blood had been drained from his body. He instinctively moved to snatch my phone, but his eyes caught the wall of MMA championship trophies behind me, and he froze. In the end, all he could do was stand there, clenching his teeth, his voice hoarse. "Arya, you're violating my privacy! I can sue you!" I laughed, not loudly, but everyone in the room could hear the cold, dismissive mockery in it. "Sue me?" I repeated slowly, as if I'd just heard the most absurd joke. "Rick, it seems you're so panicked you've forgotten where you are." I looked up at him, each word sharp and clear, yet maintaining the composure of someone in absolute control. "This is my home. I'm using my phone to broadcast you cheating on me in my bed. Tell me, which law forbids me from exposing the truth inside my own property?" With that, I turned the camera toward the trembling lump under the covers. My voice remained soft, almost gentle on the surface, which only made it more unbearable for the listener. "And you, Jenna," I enunciated each syllable. "My friend of 10 years. You live in an apartment I pay for. You drive the BMW I gifted you. You use the things I gave you, only to end up climbing into the bed of the man who is supposed to be my boyfriend." I paused, my gaze sweeping over the form, trying to shrink into nothingness. "Jenna, all these years, did you really think I couldn't see it? The envy in your eyes every time you stood next to me. You were jealous of my money, my skills, my family, of everything you could never reach, no matter how hard you tried." I took slow steps toward the bed, the click of my heels echoing clearly in the tense silence. Stopping at the edge, I looked down at her, my voice casual, as if bestowing a rare favor. "Today, I'm giving you a chance to be famous. Lift your head. Say hello to the 200,000 people watching this stream. Tell them how you managed to spend my money without a shred of guilt, and then turned around and stabbed me in the back so beautifully." Under the blanket, Jenna's body trembled even more violently. Pushed to his limit, the last dregs of Rick's masculine pride finally surfaced. He pulled Jenna behind him and looked up at me, his eyes a mixture of fury and desperation. "Arya, what do you want? What good does blowing this up do for you?" I smirked, the smile at the corner of my lips slowly deepening, beautiful and chilling. "What good? I'm enjoying myself. For one." I paused for a moment, then leisurely turned the camera back to myself. The light shone on my face, the glittering wall of trophies behind me making every word I spoke resonate with undeniable authority. "Oh, and one more thing you two probably don't know." I looked directly into the lens, slowly emphasizing each word. "I am the largest single shareholder of this streaming platform." The room fell silent for a breathtaking moment. I kept smiling, my tone as elegant as if I were announcing something perfectly ordinary. "Therefore, tonight, every single dollar donated in this live stream will not be kept by the platform. It will all be transferred directly to a national fund for preventing domestic violence and infidelity." My eyes swept over their two bloodless faces, my smile growing more perfect. "Consider it a thank you from the community on my behalf. After all, not everyone can contribute so thoroughly to a charitable cause using their own infamy." The moment my last word fell, the live stream chat erupted. "A cascade of Queen, Sovereign Legend!" Comments completely covered the screen. High-value virtual gifts appeared one after another, a dazzling, non-stop fireworks display. And across from me, the faces of Rick and Jenna were so pale they were devoid of all color. Their expressions were far more spectacular than any gift that night. The live stream lasted for about half an hour before it was gracefully shut down for violating community guidelines, an order issued by the platform's super administrator account. Of course, I was the one who gave the command. A good show, if ended too abruptly, leaves the audience feeling unfulfilled. You have to let it linger, note by note, to make the players truly taste the flavor of their own downfall. As soon as the phone screen went dark, the room plunged into a suffocating, terrifying silence. Rick and Jenna hastily dressed themselves, their disheveled, pathetic appearances now completely stripped of any dignity. They looked like two actors yanked from the stage and thrown into the mud, wishing they could find a crack in the floor to disappear into. "Arya, Rick started, his voice painfully hoarse. I didn't turn around, just coldly uttered two words. "Get out." After speaking, I walked leisurely to the window and pulled back the heavy curtains. Down below, the street had, at some point, become packed with people. Reporters, streamers, newshounds, all of them drawn by the seismic shockwave of the live stream. Camera flashes went off in a relentless volley, so bright they seemed to tear the night apart, turning the courtyard below into a dazzling outdoor stage. The moment my silhouette appeared behind the glass, the crowd erupted like water hitting a hot skillet. "Is Rick Sterling in there? Who is the other woman? Miss Thorne, can you please comment on your relationship with Rick Sterling?" The overlapping shouts pushed the atmosphere to a fever pitch. The second Jenna saw the scene, her legs gave out. She crumpled to the floor, her face as white as if her soul had been ripped out. Rick wasn't faring much better. I didn't need to look closely to know that he understood. It was over. The image of the sophisticated, debonair playboy he had painstakingly built for 3 years had been utterly demolished in a single night. "Arya, I was wrong. I truly know I was wrong." Rick suddenly lunged forward, trying to grab my legs as if to cling to his last shred of hope. But before he could even touch me, a swift kick sent him sprawling to the side. It wasn't a hard kick, but it was enough to make him land awkwardly on the floor in a deeply undignified heap. Yet, he seemed numb to the pain, scrambling back up to his knees in front of me, crying and slapping his own face. "It was me. I was a fool. It was a moment of weakness. Arya, please, just give me one more chance. Can we start over?" Tears and snot mingled on the face once adored by so many, now just a pathetic, laughable mess. If this had been before, perhaps I would have felt a pang of sorrow. But now, the only thing I felt was a wave of disgust rising from the very pit of my stomach. I leaned down, lightly tapping his agonizingly contorted face with the edge of my phone, my voice flat and cold as ice. "Rick, stop the act." He froze. I looked directly into his eyes, a slow smirk playing on my lips. "Did you really think I didn't know? Behind my back, it wasn't just Jenna you were supporting with my money." The moment those words fell, he was like a statue, the tears still clinging to his lashes, but his expression had instantly changed. His pupils constricted, his face showing an unconcealable panic. "You? How did you know?" I straightened up, casually brushing off my clothes, not even deigning to give him a spare glance. "You guess." Then I spoke slowly, my tone cruelly calm. "I'm giving you 10 minutes to get out of my apartment." I tilted my head, my eyes drifting towards the street below, where the flashes were still strobing relentlessly, my lips curling into a faint smile. "If you're any slower," I paused, then added languidly, "for example, a national MMA champion." In a moment of frustration, casually tossing a traitor from a second-story balcony, Rick immediately started to tremble. He didn't dare say another word, hastily pulling up the almost catatonic Jenna and stumbling out the door like they were fleeing a disaster. I stood perfectly still, watching their pathetic figures retreat, my eyes as calm as still water, without a trace of pity or lingering affection. Just then, my phone vibrated. A text from my assistant popped up on the screen. "Miss Thorne, all the compiled materials on Rick Sterling and Jenna Miles have been released. They are currently trending Hayshown on all social media platforms." Another message followed quickly. "Also, we can't reach Rick's mother. I had someone check. She's on a flight to New York. It's likely she'll come here directly to cause a scene." I looked at the screen and let out a small laugh. Excellent. I was just thinking it was a shame this play seemed to have only just begun. I didn't expect the second act to arrive at my doorstep so quickly. I replied with only 2 words. "Let her come." Then, I made another call. It rang twice before being picked up. "Hello, Caleb." A deep, steady male voice, calm as ever, came from the other end. Aria. I saw the stream. You handled it perfectly. Caleb Vance was a friend from college, one of the very few people I still kept in touch with. He was now the head of a top-tier private security firm. If I was adept at controlling the narrative in the boardroom, Caleb was the one I trusted most when it came to securing and controlling a physical scene. Do me a favor, I said, sinking into the sofa, my voice even and clear. Send a few of your men over to watch the entrance. No one gets in or out without authorization. Everyone who shows up tonight, whether they're trying to enter or leave, needs to be under control. No problem. The other end paused for a moment, then he asked, his voice carrying a very faint hint of something else. Including Rick Sterling's mother? I laughed. But there wasn't a shred of warmth in it. Especially her. I leaned back, slowly turning the phone in my hand, each word light as a breeze but hiding a razor-sharp edge. Please do me the favor of inviting her into the lobby. And be sure to select a few reporters with the best camera angles to live-stream the entire process. I raised my eyes to the window, still illuminated by the flashing lights outside, my lips curling into a perfect arc. I want everyone to see clearly. Let's see just how far her and her son's shamelessness and lack of morals can go to put on such a brazen spectacle today. The next morning, the doorbell rang incessantly, a shrill, piercing sound that dragged me from my sleep. I didn't rush. As usual, I leisurely got out of bed, went to the bathroom to wash up, changed into a sleek set of athletic wear, and only then walked to the villa's intercom screen. On the screen, a middle-aged woman in a mink coat and heavy makeup was leaning into the camera, screaming with a complete lack of decorum. It was Sharon Sterling, Rick's mother. Aria Thorne, are you going to open this door or not? How dare you treat my son like this? What on earth did my family ever do to you? Behind her, several men in black suits stood in a line, their faces impassive, preventing the crowd of reporters from getting too close. But even from a distance, their lenses were aimed squarely at her contorted, furious face, capturing every single expression. I pressed the talk button, my voice lazy and calm, broadcasting through the speaker. Good morning, Mrs. Sterling. You seem quite upset for so early in the day. Hearing my voice, Sharon became even more enraged, as if fuel had been thrown on a fire. You have the nerve to call me Mrs. Sterling? You've pushed my son into this mess. And you can still sleep peacefully? Let me tell you. If you don't give me a clear explanation today, I'll die right here at your gate for the whole world to see. I raised an eyebrow, a flicker of faint mockery in my eyes. Oh? And what kind of explanation would you like? I asked leisurely. Or perhaps I should gather all the counterfeit designer bags and watches Rick gave me, wrap them up nicely, and return them all to you? I tilted my head, a cold smile forming on my lips. For the past 3 years, to help him build that perfect, rich kid image, I invested a significant amount of money. Unfortunately, he is both mediocre and greedy. He used a portion of the money I gave him to buy fakes to placate me, and the rest to support his affairs. I've known about it for a long time. I just couldn't be bothered to expose it. I never imagined he'd have the audacity to use that very fact as proof to slander me. Sharon was speechless for a few seconds, but she quickly started shouting again, even louder, as if a higher volume could drown out the truth. What fakes, and what real ones? It was obvious you were obsessed with my son. You're domineering and controlling, always wanting to possess him like an object. He finally found true love after so much suffering, and you use these despicable tactics to destroy it. Aria Thorne, you are truly a wicked woman. Behind the barricade, the live-streaming reporters were nearly agape. The online comment sections were exploding. Wow. What kind of logic is this? Her son is a leech and a cheater, and she can still defend him to this extent? Seriously twisted psychology. In the eyes of people like her, their son is always innocent, and every mistake is the woman's fault. The protagonist really drew the short straw. Not just one parasite, but a whole family of them. I watched Sharon's triumphant expression through the screen, the smile on my lips fading, leaving only a layer of coldness. Mrs. Sterling, I began slowly. Are you aware that defamation, if proven, can lead to criminal charges? Sharon faltered slightly but quickly regained her bravado. Everything I said is the truth. If you did it, why be afraid of people talking about it? Very well. I nodded, then calmly pressed the button to open the main gate. You want to come in and talk? I'll let you in. Thinking I had started to get nervous, Sharon immediately lifted her chin, adjusted her mink coat, and strode in arrogantly, as if she were the one in charge. The reporters saw their chance and tried to swarm in, but were immediately blocked at the gate by Caleb's men. Sorry. This is private property. Unauthorized personnel are not permitted. Sharon turned around, her voice sharp. Let them in! I want the whole country to see this girl's true face! But the security guards stood like a solid wall, unmoving. Frustrated, she could only swallow her anger, muttering curses under her breath as she entered the living room alone. The moment she saw me sitting leisurely on the sofa, a cup of coffee in hand, her rage flared up again. Aria Thorne, you! Hold on, Mrs. Sterling. I raised a hand, cutting her off, my tone still composed. Setting the coffee cup down, I leaned over and pulled a thick stack of documents from the drawer below, tossing it onto the coffee table in front of her. These are detailed bank statements of all of Rick's expenditures for the past 3 years. I leaned back, my voice slow and deliberate. Including the mink coat you're wearing, the house he bought for your brother, and all the money he transferred to his outside relationships. Sharon's expression changed instantly. Her hand holding the papers began to tremble noticeably. The further she flipped, the paler her face became, as if each line of text was draining her last ounce of strength. Impossible, she murmured, her voice starting to break. Impossible. I let out a soft, chilling laugh. Did you really think he was that capable? You thought he was some business prodigy who could make millions from a few live streams? You thought those social connections, resources, contracts, and that fame just appeared out of thin air? I stood up and walked toward her, step by step. I looked down at her, my gaze calm and sharp, as if peeling away her last remaining mask. For 3 years, he ate my food, wore my clothes, lived in my house. I personally built his image, guided him, paved the way for him, turning a man with nothing into the cash cow for your entire family. I paused, then asked very quietly, I really want to know, in what way have I ever treated you and your son unfairly? Without waiting for her answer, I continued, my voice growing colder. And what about you two? He used my money to party, to show off, to support his mistresses, to bring women into my home, onto my bed. And you pretended to be oblivious to enjoy a life of luxury. You took benefits from me, yet still felt I wasn't gentle enough, wasn't pliant enough, wasn't enough like the obedient daughter-in-law you wanted. I looked directly into her eyes, which were now showing clear signs of panic, each word I uttered light, yet heavy as a hammer blow. Mrs. Sterling, one shouldn't be too greedy. When you enjoy things that don't belong to you, you should be prepared to pay them back in full when the time comes. I curved my lips slightly. With interest. Sharon opened her mouth but couldn't utter a single word. Her lips trembled, and the stack of papers in her hand fell to the floor, scattering around her feet. I didn't look at her anymore, simply picked up my phone, called my assistant, and put it on speaker. The assistant's voice came through quickly, clear and professional. Miss Thorne, everything you instructed is complete. Good, I replied flatly. Report. We have officially filed a lawsuit against Rick Sterling for fraud and embezzlement. During his time managing company affairs, he used internal resources for personal gain, with the total amount involved exceeding $5 million. In addition, we have submitted all evidence related to his tax evasion. The IRS has already launched an investigation. The assistant paused for a moment. As for Sharon Sterling, the downtown apartment and the $500,000 in the account under her name all originate from illicit cash flows. We have officially filed a motion to freeze all assets. Every word from my assistant echoed in the silent room, so clear that no one could pretend to have misheard. Sharon's eyes were wide open. When she heard the words "freeze all assets," the aggressive demeanor on her face vanished completely. Her entire body seemed to be drained of strength. She swayed once, then collapsed onto the floor, unconscious. Sharon was taken away by the very ambulance I had called. Before leaving, the attending paramedic gave me a look full of sympathy. Perhaps in his eyes, I was just a pitiful girl, pushed to the brink by a monstrous family of in-laws. I didn't explain. I just nodded politely, said a quiet thank you, and watched the door slowly close. The living room returned to its original quiet. I stood by the window, silently gazing outside. The reporters were still camped out in front of the gate, none of them willing to leave. Their lenses were all pointed in my direction, as if my reappearance would instantly turn this place into the city's new focal point. I knew all too well. This drama had only just begun. It didn't take long for Rick to receive summons from the court and the police. It was probably only then that he truly realized I had no intention of just making a scene and letting it go. When I make a move, there are absolutely no escape routes left for traitors. From that day on, my phone was flooded with calls and messages from him. The content was always the same. Sometimes begging, sometimes repenting, sometimes threatening, but always boiling down to him wanting me to go easy, to leave him a way out. I didn't bother to reply once, simply blocking his number. Compared to Rick, Jenna chose a different approach. She sent me a text so long it was tiring just to look at. Every line an attempt to portray anguish and remorse. She said she knew she was wrong, that it was a moment of foolishness, that she too was a victim deceived by Rick. She even said that she had always seen me as her dearest sister, the most important friend in her life. Finally, she begged for my forgiveness because she couldn't lose the life she currently had. I read those insincere words and found it all amusing. Someone who had betrayed me so deeply could still write such earnest prose, as if she were the most pitiful victim in the story. I replied with only 4 words. You made your bed. Then I blocked her number as well. I thought that after that blow, those two wouldn't have the energy to bother me again for a while. But I had clearly underestimated their shamelessness. Just 2 days later, a strange new narrative began to circulate online. A number of marketing accounts and influencers started posting articles with a tone that was half objective, half leading. They said I was using my power to bully them, that I was taking things too far. They argued that even though Rick was wrong, he didn't deserve to have his life utterly destroyed. Some even brazenly concluded that I was the type of woman who was too cold and domineering, so being cheated on was not surprising. At the same time, Jenna's past was dragged out. Someone wrote about her impoverished background, growing up without love, living a difficult life from a young age. And I, a silver spoon heiress born at the finish line, was depicted as someone who kept her around like a decorative object, using charity to crush her self-esteem, causing her to slowly lose her way and make a mistake. These long, rambling articles, seemingly full of sympathy and fairness, were in reality twisted interpretations of the truth. They spread like a virus across all platforms. Public opinion began to shift. Netizens who didn't know the full story started flocking to attack me, some even turning to pity Rick and Jenna. My social media posts were flooded with vicious comments. This woman is terrifying. A real-life Medusa. Cheating is wrong, but cornering someone to this extent is just cruel. Jenna is the one who's truly pitiful. She had the wrong friend, treated like a pawn by some rich woman to control her life. I looked at those words without anger. In fact, I laughed, because I knew exactly what this was. Rick and Jenna's counterattack. They must have scraped together their last bit of money to hire a professional PR team, planning to use a sob story to gain sympathy and turn the tide of public opinion. The idea wasn't terrible. Unfortunately for them, they had chosen the wrong opponent. I opened my laptop and logged into an old, rarely used email account. In the inbox lay an email that had never been deleted. The sender was the private investigator I had hired some time ago. Inside was a chillingly detailed background check on Jenna, along with an encrypted video file. I clicked open the video. The scene was a high-end restaurant. Jenna was having dinner with a paunchy, middle-aged man. Throughout the meal, the man casually rested his hand on her thigh while talking. Jenna didn't flinch. On the contrary, she smiled charmingly, proactively pouring him wine, gently fawning over him as if she were all too familiar with this kind of interaction. I recognized the man immediately. He was Mr. Wallace, the director of an entertainment company, notorious in the industry for his lechery and messy private life. The video was time-stamped 6 months ago. Right around the time Jenna had started seeing Rick, I fast-forwarded to the end. The final frame showed Jenna, arm in arm with Mr. Wallace, walking into a luxury hotel. I closed the video, a faint smile on my lips, but the amusement in my eyes was frozen solid. Jenna, you love playing the victim, don't you? Fine. If you want to put on such a tragic play, I'll let the truth itself slap that mask right off your face. I anonymously sent the video and the investigation report to several of the most influential gossip blogs and expose accounts online. The attached message contained only one sentence. Part 2 of this year's biggest drama is officially live. After doing all that, I closed my laptop. But for some reason, I didn't feel the relief I expected. Just then, my phone screen lit up. It was a text from Caleb. Don't mind the noise online. It was followed by a head-patting sticker, something completely at odds with his usual calm and stoic image. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before replying with an OK emoji. His next message came quickly. There's something I think you should know. I frowned slightly, my finger hovering over the screen. What is it? Caleb replied swiftly. Jenna's side might be doing more than just hiring a PR firm. My gaze darkened. What do you mean? There was a brief silence on the other end before he sent the next message. My people found out she's been in contact with a man named Leo Foster. He was a former patient of yours. The moment I saw that name, my heart clenched. Leo Foster. Those 2 words were like a cold needle, instantly piercing the calm I had been trying so hard to maintain. 3 years ago, he had been a case I personally handled, a patient with delusional disorder, harboring pathological obsessions and a twisted romantic fixation on his therapist. It had taken me a full year of professional dedication and patience to guide him back to a normal life. When the treatment concluded, we signed a strict confidentiality agreement and completely ceased all contact. We hadn't interacted once since, and now, Jenna had found him. How? And more importantly, what did she want? A chilling thought crossed my mind. I immediately called my assistant, asking her to investigate Jenna's purpose for approaching Leo Foster as quickly as possible. Half an hour later, she called back, her voice heavy from the very first sentence. Miss Thorne, I'm afraid the situation is not good. I remained silent, my fingertips tightening on the desk. Jenna is inciting Leo Foster to file a complaint against you with the American Psychological Association. She's claiming that during the consultation process, you unethically manipulated his psyche and even disclosed private information. I froze for a beat. In the field of psychological counseling, the gravest sins are violating professional ethics and client confidentiality. If this accusation was substantiated, the price I'd pay would be more than just my reputation. I could have my license revoked, my years of hard-earned credibility destroyed, and even face legal consequences. It was only then that I truly understood. This was the fatal blow Jenna had prepared for me. She knew that money and fame were things I never cared much for. But my profession was different. It was something I genuinely loved, a path into which I had poured my heart, my pride, and my years. It was my anchor and my final boundary. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to take a deep breath before I asked, my voice steady. Does she have evidence? She does. The assistant replied quickly, her voice growing heavier. It's unclear where Jenna got it, but she has a recording of a session between you and Leo Foster. I've listened to it. It's a maliciously edited audio clip, completely twisting the context and true meaning of your words. She paused, then added, Right now, That audio clip, along with a formal complaint signed by Leo Foster himself, has been submitted to the APA's Ethics Committee. I opened my eyes, my vision becoming colder and clearer than ever before. A strike aimed directly at my foundation, precise, venomous, leaving no room to breathe. Jenna, I had truly underestimated her. "What do we do now, Miss Thorne?" my assistant asked, her voice laced with worry. "The APA has sent an email requesting a written explanation within 3 days, and your cooperation with the investigation." "I understand," I replied slowly, my voice strangely calm. "Please respond for me. Tell them I will be present and fully prepared for the hearing." "But there are no buts." I cut her off, each word sharp and distinct. An innocent person has nothing to fear. If she wants to play this game, then I'll play it with her to the very end. After hanging up, I opened my laptop and began to retrieve all of Leo Foster's consultation files from 3 years ago. Notes from every therapy session, psychological assessments, and all the audio and video recordings kept throughout the treatment process. I had always been meticulous, almost obsessively so, in my work. As a senior consultant, I never allowed myself to be lax with record-keeping, precisely to prepare for unforeseen circumstances. I never thought that this very caution would one day be the thing to save my career. Just as I was focused on reviewing the documents, the doorbell rang again. Thinking it was one of Caleb's men, I didn't pay it much mind and went to answer. But when the door opened, the person standing before me was the last one I wanted to see. It was Jenna. She looked far more haggard than she had 2 days ago. The dark circles under her eyes were impossible to hide, and her complexion was ashen. Unfortunately, no matter how hard she tried to project a pitiful image, it wasn't enough to stir any compassion. Instead, it only made her act more transparent. "Aria," she began, tears already welling up. "I know I was wrong. Can you please forgive me?" I leaned against the doorframe, calmly watching her performance, my voice devoid of emotion. "Is that all you came here to say?" "No." She shook her head hastily, her eyes red and her voice choked. "I came to beg you to let Rick go. And me too. Aria, our 10 years of friendship, doesn't it count for anything? Do you really want to push us to the brink?" At that, I laughed. A soft laugh, but the mockery in it was unmistakable. "Jenna, are you confused about something?" I looked directly into her eyes. "The one who betrayed our 10-year friendship was you, wasn't it? The one who spent my money while climbing into the bed of my supposed boyfriend was also you. And the one who, after being exposed, felt no remorse, and instead went all out to destroy my career. Isn't that still you?" Each sentence I spoke was calmer than the last, which only made Jenna's face grow progressively paler. Clearly, she hadn't expected me to find out so quickly. Seeing that her tears and pleas were having no effect, her expression instantly shifted. The weakness on her face was torn away, replaced by a twisted, stubborn resentment. "Aria, don't you dare go too far," she hissed, her voice suddenly sharp. "Let me tell you, this thing with Leo Foster is just the beginning. You pushed me to this, so now there's nothing I won't do." "Is that so?" I crossed my arms, looking at her as if watching a third-rate play. "So, what's your next move? Find a few more of my former patients, lure them or force them to fabricate a few more stories to gang up on me?" Jenna froze. That brief hesitation was all I needed to know I was right. I took another step forward, closing the distance between us. My voice dropped, slower, colder, each word terrifyingly clear. "Jenna, do you really think you can do all this without leaving a single trace?" I stared into her eyes, my lips curling slightly. "That video of you and Mr. Wallace at the hotel. Would you like me to send the full, unredacted, high-definition version to every major entertainment outlet online?" Jenna's face went rigid. I continued, giving her no chance to interject. "Or how about the time you embezzled money from your own father's company to cover your gambling debts? Do you want me to forward the original evidence directly to him?" With every word, her face grew a shade paler. But I wasn't finished. And that so-called tragic past you're using to garner sympathy online. I tilted my head, my gaze like ice. Are you sure you want me to publicize the fact that you were the one who pushed your own sister down the stairs, leaving her with a lifelong disability, only to calmly pin all the blame on her? This time, Jenna was completely frozen. By the time I finished, her face was deathly white, completely drained of blood. Her whole body shook uncontrollably, as if a single touch would cause her to shatter. You! How could you know all of that? I stood up straight, looking at her with an almost cruel calmness. Because I'm not just a psychologist. I paused, then continued, enunciating every word. I'm a psychologist who is good enough to see through people's hearts, and sober enough to follow the truth to its very end. Your secrets were never that well hidden from me. My lips curved slightly, my voice still gentle. But my words left no room for retreat. So, Jenna, put away your pathetic little tricks. Otherwise, the next person standing in front of you won't be me, but a warden and your cellmate. With that, without giving her another second to react, I slammed the door shut. Immediately, frantic pounding and a chaotic mix of sobs and curses came from the other side. I stood silently in the foyer for a few seconds, then carried on as if nothing had happened. I knew I had won this round, but strangely, I felt no thrill of victory. All that remained was a dull, pervasive exhaustion spreading from deep within my soul, impossible to shake. 3 days later, the hearing at the American Psychological Association was held as scheduled. When I walked in, the small conference room was already full. Besides the members of the ethics committee, there was Leo Foster, along with 2 unsurprising faces, Jenna and Rick. They were there under the guise of being Leo's supportive family, sitting in a corner, seemingly discreet but clearly there to witness my downfall. The moment she saw me, Jenna's gaze shot over, her eyes filled with undisguised venom. Rick was the complete opposite. He kept his head down, not daring to look at me, his guilty posture almost comical. As for Leo, he sat in a wheelchair, his face pale, his eyes darting around nervously, his entire being radiating an unconcealable anxiety. I walked to the opposite side of the table, pulled out a chair, and sat down. My voice as calm as if I were greeting an old acquaintance. Leo. It's been a while. Hearing my voice, his body flinched. He lowered his head even further, completely avoiding my gaze. The hearing began promptly. The committee chair spoke first, holding Leo's complaint and reading its contents aloud for the entire board. In the letter, Leo emotionally alleged that during our therapy, I had exploited his trust to psychologically manipulate him, systematically controlling his perception, prying into his private life beyond professional boundaries, and even violating his most intimate memories, all to satisfy my own sick amusement. Accompanying this was the maliciously edited audio recording. Listening to that clip alone, my voice could easily be misinterpreted as leading, coercive, and purposefully interrogative. The chair closed the file and looked up at me, his expression grave. Miss Thorne, regarding Mr. Foster's allegations in this recording, do you have any explanation? Instantly, all eyes in the room turned to me. I could see the glee on Jenna's face. Even Rick, who had been avoiding my gaze, couldn't hide a flicker of hope in his eyes. They all thought I was trapped, but I didn't rush to answer. I slowly opened the briefcase I had brought, taking out a laptop and a thick file, and placed them neatly on the table. I do, of course, I said with a faint smile. But before I explain, I'd like to invite the committee members and Mr. Foster to watch the full, unedited video first. I connected the laptop to the room's projector, and the large screen slowly lit up. It showed my consultation room from 3 years ago, a familiar, quiet, and private space. In the frame, Leo and I were sitting opposite each other. The timestamp in the corner clearly read 3 years prior. Leo's voice in the video spoke first, far more agitated and disordered than his present self. Dr. Thorne, I feel like I'm going crazy. I can't control myself anymore. I think about you all day, I want to know everything about you. You think I'm sick, don't you? You're looking down on me, aren't you? In the video, I listened silently before replying gently, my voice firm yet warm. I'm not looking down on you at all, Leo. I understand what you're feeling. In psychology, this is known as transference. It's not an uncommon reaction during therapy, and many clients experience similar states. What we need to do today isn't to run from it, but to face it together and learn how to process it in a healthy way. The video continued, documenting the entire process of his therapy. My listening, empathizing, analyzing the root causes of his issues, and step by step, helping him release his pent-up emotions, identify his cognitive distortions, and slowly walk out of his own darkness. The doctored audio clip was, in fact, just a small part of an empty chair therapy technique session. In that session, I guided him to imagine his estranged mother, who had abandoned him as a child, sitting in front of him, and to voice all his long-suppressed feelings, but taken out of context. That recording was twisted into evidence of me coercing a client to reveal private details. The video lasted for an hour and a half. Throughout that time, the hearing room was almost completely silent. No one spoke, because it was all too clear. The person before them was not a professional who abused her position to manipulate someone's mind, but a dedicated, professional, and composed psychologist who strictly adhered to her ethical boundaries. When the video ended, I turned off the projector, picked up the thick file on the table, and handed it to each of the committee members. This is the complete therapy file for my 1 year of sessions with Leo Foster. A total of 50 sessions. I spoke slowly and clearly. It includes the treatment plan, progress evaluations at each stage, and signed consent forms from every single session, all bearing Mr. Foster's own signature. I looked up at the board, my voice calm but firm. I trust that as professionals, you are more than capable of distinguishing between genuine evidence and a premeditated, malicious fabrication. The committee chair took the file, his expression growing more severe. The other members immediately began examining the documents. As for Leo, his face was ashen, his body trembling uncontrollably, all composure lost. Jenna and Rick's faces grew paler by the second. They had planned for everything, but they certainly never expected me to have kept such complete and irrefutable proof. After a while, the chair placed the file down on the table, his gaze turning to Leo, sharp as a scalpel. "Mr. Foster," he began, each word carrying immense pressure. "At this point, is there anything else you'd like to say? Do you still stand by all the allegations in this complaint?" Leo's lips trembled. I, he stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence. He instinctively glanced at Jenna, as if seeking a final lifeline, but Jenna immediately looked away, pretending to be completely uninvolved. At this point, her only thought was to save herself. Rick looked like he wished he could simply vanish. In that moment, a flash of intense desperation crossed Leo's eyes. Then suddenly, he screamed, his voice breaking with panic. "It was her! It was Jenna who told me to do it!" The entire room was stunned. Leo pointed a trembling finger directly at Jenna, his eyes bloodshot. "She promised me $200,000. She told me to come forward and lie about you. She said if I could ruin you, she would be with me." Jenna's face went white. "You're lying!" she shrieked, nearly jumping out of her chair. "I did no such thing! I'm not lying!" Leo yelled, so agitated he tried to push himself out of his wheelchair, only to collapse back into it. "I have proof! I have the wire transfers from you! And the text messages." He fumbled for his phone. 2 committee members immediately stepped forward and took his phone, with the entire board as witnesses. Within minutes, the chat logs, transaction histories, and every exchange between Leo and Jenna were displayed on the internal review monitor. There were no gaps, no room for denial. The evidence was undeniable. At that point, Jenna could no longer deny anything. As if all her strength had been drained, she slumped back into her chair, her eyes empty and lifeless. In an instant, Her final mask had been stripped away. The outcome of the hearing was, of course, exactly as I expected. The APA not only dismissed all allegations against me, but also announced on the spot that they were permanently revoking Jenna's professional credentials. Yes, she had also studied psychology, but it was a pity that after graduating, she had never truly entered the profession on her own merit. Simultaneously, her and Leo's actions of defamation and malicious intent were referred directly to the legal authorities for further action. As for Rick, as an accomplice, he naturally couldn't escape his involvement. A meticulously planned conspiracy had ended in a way so ironic it made you want to laugh. When I stepped out of the APA building, the sunlight outside was so bright it made me squint. Caleb's car was already parked at the curb. He was leaning against the door. Seeing me emerge, he gave a slight nod, his tone as nonchalant as if the outcome had been a foregone conclusion. "I knew you'd be fine." I smiled faintly, opened the car door, and got in. "A busy man like you, personally stopping by? I was worried," he said, handing me a bottle of water, the gesture so natural it felt like a habit. So I wanted to see for myself. I took the water, twisted the cap, took a small sip, and then tilted my head to look at him. "And now that you've seen, what do you think?" "I think you're even calmer than I anticipated," Caleb said, closing the door and walking around to the driver's seat. As he started the car, he asked, "What's next? How are you planning to deal with Rick and Jenna? What's there to deal with?" I leaned back, my voice casual. "Just let the law handle them." I turned to look out the window, my eyes as still as a waveless lake. They're no longer worth another second of my time. Caleb just nodded slightly and said nothing more. The car slowly pulled into traffic. A brief silence settled in the car. I rested my head against the seat, watching the scenery recede behind us, yet my heart wasn't as peaceful as my outward appearance suggested. This play, while seemingly a complete victory for me, had cost me a man I had genuinely loved for 3 years, a friend I had trusted for 10, and the last shred of innocence I had reserved for human connection. That price was never cheap. "What are you thinking about?" Caleb's voice pulled me from my thoughts. I shook my head slightly. "Nothing." "Area." He said my name suddenly, his voice more serious than usual. I turned to look at him. Caleb was still looking straight ahead. In the sunlight, the lines of his face were even more defined, sharp, and reassuringly solid. "You're not alone," he said very slowly, very clearly, as if wanting each word to sink deep into my heart. "You still have me." For some reason, my heart skipped a beat. The following days were surprisingly calm. Rick and Jenna, implicated in a series of charges, including fraud, defamation, and tax evasion, were officially arrested. What awaited them was the strict judgment of the law. Sharon Sterling, after waking up in the hospital to the news of her son's arrest and her own near-total loss of assets, had a complete breakdown. She was eventually committed to a psychiatric facility, where she reportedly still lived in her own delusions, constantly muttering about her precious son being ruined by others. Online, after the full truth was revealed, public opinion completely reversed. From being a target of criticism, I was suddenly hailed as a role model for independent women, someone who dared to unmask a traitor and defend her own honor. My psychology clinic was flooded with appointment requests. The streaming platform I held a major stake in saw its user base and valuations soar after the incident. Everything seemed to be heading in a better direction. But I knew better than anyone that some wounds, even after they've closed on the surface, leave a very long scar underneath. One day, I was in my office organizing files when my assistant knocked and entered. "Miss Thorne, a Mr. Vance is here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment." I looked up, a little surprised. "Send him in." A moment later, Caleb walked in. He was wearing a perfectly tailored black suit that accentuated his tall, lean frame, making him stand out with a quiet but powerful presence. I looked at him, half joking. "Someone as busy as you has time to just drop by?" "I was in the neighborhood," he replied succinctly, placing a document folder on my desk. What's this? I asked, curiously taking it. Open it. I opened the folder and pulled out the papers inside. The moment I saw the title on the first page, I froze. It was a stock transfer agreement. I flipped through a few more pages, my surprise growing with each one. This is... Caleb stood by the desk, his voice as calm as if he were discussing something mundane. Before they were completely exposed, Rick and Jenna hired a PR firm to attack you online. At the same time, they were secretly manipulating your company's stock price, hoping to retaliate. He paused. I bought up all the shares they were trying to short. They're all yours now. I looked down at the agreement in my hands. It represented 10% of my company's scattered shares. The number wasn't massive, but in the context of the situation at the time, to quietly acquire it all without anyone noticing was no easy feat. I understood perfectly well the effort, time, and attention Caleb had invested behind these seemingly light pieces of paper. I looked up at him, my voice catching slightly. Why? Caleb met my gaze, his eyes as deep and calm as the night sea. It's not for as many reasons as you think, he said with a faint smile. Consider it me repaying a very old debt. A debt? I was even more confused. What could I have possibly done for you that was so significant? At my question, Caleb actually laughed. It was a very slight laugh, but it held a rare warmth, like winter sun on a frozen lake, enough to dispel some of the lingering gloom within me. You really don't remember? He asked, slowly jogging my memory. 10 years ago, at the National Collegiate MMA Finals, your opponent had a sudden family emergency. She had a complete breakdown backstage and was about to forfeit. I went still. A memory, long buried, resurfaced hazily. You were the one who went to find her, Caleb continued, his voice low and steady. You sat with her for nearly an hour, talking to her, calming her down, pulling her back from the brink of panic. In the end, she got in the ring. Not only that, she fought brilliantly and took second place. And you? He looked at me, the smile in his eyes deepening. You missed your warm-up, injured your arm in the first round, and still won. Caleb's words transported me back to that afternoon. The fragmented memories pieced themselves together. I think I did do that, but that girl was my sister, Caleb said, softly. I was completely stunned. He looked at me, his voice growing deeper. She once told me you were her savior, the person who changed her life. If it weren't for you that day, she might have given up on everything for good. Caleb took a step closer, resting his hands lightly on the desk in front of me. He leaned in slightly, his gaze locked on mine, so firm and serious it left no room for doubt. So, Arya. His voice was very low, but every word was clear. Now it's my turn to protect you. I don't even know how Caleb and I left my office. My mind just kept replaying his last words. Now it's my turn to protect you. I don't know when it happened, but in a deep corner of my heart, a place long covered in dust after so much disappointment and betrayal, something seemed to be quietly melting away. Caleb said he wanted to celebrate my beautiful victory and invited me to dinner. I didn't refuse, but he didn't take me to a fancy restaurant. Instead, he drove me down a small alley and stopped in front of a simple, family-run eatery. The place wasn't large, the furniture was unpretentious, even a bit worn with age, but that very normality gave it a unique warmth. The owner was a kindly-looking older woman, her face always holding a gentle smile. The moment she saw Caleb, she came out to greet him warmly. Caleb, you're here. The usual today? Yes, the usual. Please, Mrs. Zhang, Caleb replied naturally, his tone one of familiar ease. He then tilted his head towards me. And a serving of your special sweet and sour pork ribs, please. He paused, a slight smile on his lips. She likes sweets. I looked up at him, a little surprised. How did you know I like sweet things? Caleb seemed to read my mind, answering flatly. My sister told me. She said you bought her a full sugar bubble tea after the match that day. I laughed. I couldn't believe someone remembered such a small detail after 10 years. The food arrived quickly. It was delicious. Not flashy or complex, but it had the comforting warmth of a home-cooked meal. It was the kind of food that soothed your soul from the first bite. Caleb and I ate and talked about college, about the years we spent building our careers, about old memories we thought we'd forgotten, and about our current thoughts on work and life. I suddenly realized we had a surprising number of things in common. We both enjoyed challenging sports, had a thing for crime dramas, and even shared an uncanny resemblance in our disliked foods, aesthetic tastes, and small daily habits. It was a natural chemistry that required no effort, no pretense, no one having to contort themselves into a version the other wanted to see. In my 3 years with Rick, I had never once felt this way. With him, I always had to force myself to be the perfect girlfriend he envisioned, smoothing over all my sharp edges, hiding my intelligence, feigning naivety, trying to be a sweet, gentle princess who could be placated with money and empty compliments. I used to think that was love. It was only now that I understood. True love is never about pretense or unconditional appeasement. It's the harmony between two interesting souls, the feeling of meeting someone who doesn't require you to shrink yourself or to shine too brightly, someone for whom just being yourself is enough to move their heart. Arya. Caleb suddenly put down his chopsticks, his gaze resting on my face, more focused than usual. I looked up. He watched me for a few seconds before asking very slowly, "Have you ever thought about what kind of person you'd want to be with?" The question made my heart unexpectedly beat a little faster. I looked down, pretending to be calm as I picked up a piece of pork, and replied in a half-joking tone, "Well, first, he'd have to be able to beat me in a fight, out-argue me in a debate, and preferably, be richer than me." It was a line I often used to deflect questions about my love life, playful enough to stop further probing, yet absurd enough that no one took it seriously. But to my surprise, Caleb listened and then nodded seriously. "In terms of MMA, I can't say I'm a champion," he said calmly, "but as a sparring partner for you, I should be qualified enough." I looked at him, unable to suppress a smile. He continued with the same composed expression, as if outlining a business deal. "As for out-arguing you, I was president of the debate team in college. If you want to debate any topic, I'm ready to go the distance with you." He paused. "As for money..." At this, Caleb casually took a black card from his wallet and placed it on the table in front of me. His voice was so calm it was almost indifferent. "It's not much, but it should be enough for you to spend." I stared at the card, momentarily unsure how to react. I certainly recognized it. It wasn't just a credit card. It was a symbol of a class that stood at the pinnacle of power and wealth. I had always thought Caleb was just the successful, capable owner of a large security firm impressive, but within the realm of imagination, I never expected that he was the type to casually hide his true identity behind such a low-key exterior. I looked up at him. Caleb met my gaze, his voice steady. "My father is the chairman of the Vance Corporation." He paused, as if mentioning something completely ordinary. "The security firm is just a side project I started because I was interested in it." The Vance Corporation. The name alone was enough to make the entire business world sit up and take notice. I looked at the man sitting across from me, momentarily at a loss for words. In front of him, what I had always considered a good family background and a privileged upbringing suddenly seemed so normal. Caleb watched me quietly, his eyes deeper and gentler than usual. Then he asked slowly, "So, Miss Arya Thorne?" A slight smile touched his lips, his eyes holding both amusement and a rare seriousness. "With these qualifications, do I meet the standards for your ideal life partner?" My face instantly flushed. If it weren't for the warm lighting in the restaurant, my unease would have been obvious. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Can I think about it?" Caleb smiled, a rare, gentle look in his eyes. "Of course," he then asked, his voice low. "How long?" I looked at him. For some reason, in that moment, all the defenses around my heart just softened. I smiled and replied slowly, "Is a lifetime long enough?" This time, it was Caleb's turn to freeze. For a brief moment, the usual composure on his face vanished, replaced by genuine shock, which quickly morphed into a brilliant smile. It was the most beautiful smile I had ever seen on his face, no longer calm and reserved, but like a young man who had just received the most precious gift after years of waiting. He looked at me, his voice low but clear, each word landing directly in my heart. "All right." He raised an eyebrow, the smile on his lips deepening. "You have a deal." Caleb and I ended up together. There was no grand, earth-shattering proposal, no need for a flashy public announcement for the world to know. It all happened naturally, perfectly, as if after all the detours and storms, we were always meant to stand beside each other from the very beginning. Caleb was nothing like Rick. He wasn't clingy, didn't use sweet nothings to win me over, and had no interest in creating grandiose but empty romantic gestures. He would seriously debate a detail in a crime show with me, casually tease me for being bad at a video game, and then calmly sit beside me to teach me step by step. On nights when I was lost in work and forgot the time, he wouldn't say a word, but would simply unplug my laptop, lift me into his arms, and carry me home to rest. He never treated me like a fragile ornament that needed to be coddled, nor did he put me on a pedestal to be worshipped. In his eyes, I was always his equal partner. We could stand shoulder to shoulder, debate, support each other, and walk a very long life together. With him, for the first time in many years, I understood what it felt like to be at peace without being constrained, to be free yet still have a place to come home to. I could go out with him for hot pot at a small roadside stall with no makeup on, just chatting about the most trivial things. I could also wear an exquisite evening gown and appear with him at the most exclusive high society galas, calmly accepting every gaze without needing to shrink myself or pretend to be someone else. I could be Aria Thorne, the MMA champion, Aria Thorne, the clinical psychologist, Aria Thorne, the major shareholder. And at the same time, I could also just be Caleb's girlfriend, still the whole, complete Aria, without having to cut away any part of myself. After that tumultuous event, my life gradually returned to its orbit, not just back to normal, but seemingly brighter than before. As for Rick and Jenna, they had long since vanished from my world. I heard that because the evidence of their crimes was so clear and the charges so numerous, they were both sentenced to over 10 years in prison. As for Sharon Sterling, after being admitted to the psychiatric hospital, she continued to live day after day in her own delusions, endlessly muttering about her precious son being ruined by others. A family that had lived on greed, deceit, and vile schemes had finally paid the price for everything they had done. And it was only then that I truly understood that the darkest chapters of my life were finally behind me. What awaited me was no longer betrayal, calculation, or old wounds, but a completely new future, radiant, clear, and full of light. Thank you for staying until the very end.